What if the most cynical song ever written about MTV became MTV's defining anthem? The guitar riff everyone knows was born from a microphone that slipped off its stand, a sound they could never recreate. Mark Knopfler scribbled the lyrics on a scrap of paper in a store window. Then, the song sold 30 million records and built a monster he no longer recognized. This is how Money for Nothing gave Dire Straits everything, and quietly destroyed them from within. London, 1977. While the city convulsed with the raw fury of punk rock and the relentless thump of disco, a group of older, quieter men were assembling something completely out of step with the times, and completely unconcerned about it. Mark Knopfler was not a typical rock star in the making. He had worked as a junior reporter for the Yorkshire Evening Post. He had taught English part-time at a college in Loughton. He slept on an ambulance stretcher in a cramped, unheated flat in the Deptford district of South London because he could not afford a bed. His flatmates were his brother David, a social worker, and John Ilsley, who spent his days working at a lumber yard while studying at Goldsmiths College. These were not glamorous men chasing fame. They were serious musicians grinding through the ordinary machinery of daily life and finding their way towards something real. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The name Dire Straits was not chosen for its poetry. It was a description of their bank accounts, a phrase that captured their financial reality with bleak accuracy. But what they lacked in money, they more than compensated for in musicianship. Knopfler's guitar style was the group's defining characteristic, a fingerstyle technique that rejected the plectrum entirely in favor of a nuanced percussive touch shaped by J.J. Cale, Chet Atkins, and the blues tradition. In the age of the Sex Pistols, playing with that kind of subtlety and sophistication was almost a radical act. Their breakthrough arrived through a 5-song demo tape recorded in July 1977 for the sum of £120. They brought the tape to BBC Radio London DJ Charlie Gillette, looking for advice. Gillette put a track called Sultans of Swing into immediate rotation on his show. The grassroots support that followed led to a deal with a label and a debut album that went on to become a major international success. Sultans of Swing was more than a hit, it was a statement of purpose. It told the story of a low-level jazz band playing for themselves in a rainy London pub, indifferent to the empty room around them. That narrative mirrored everything Dire Straits stood for: serious musicians who valued the space in a song over the spectacle of a performance. Producer Muff Winwood and engineer Rhett Davies worked to preserve a lovely simplicity. 2 guitars, bass, and drums, recorded with a clarity that let every note breathe. But even in those early years, a fault line ran beneath the surface. Dire Straits was never a band democracy. It was always Mark Knopfler's vision, and the other members orbited that vision. His brother David felt the strain of that arrangement most acutely. During the recording of their 3rd album, Making Movies, in 1980, creative and personal tensions between the brothers reached a breaking point, and David departed. John Ilsley later recalled that while the split was painful, it lifted a tremendous strain from Mark and allowed him to take full control of the band's direction. That transition, from a brotherhood to a leader-driven project, was the first quiet step toward the monster that would eventually consume them all. By 1984, Dire Straits had built an impressive body of work. Albums like Making Movies and Love Over Gold had earned them critical respect and a devoted following. But Mark Knopfler was restless. He had grown fascinated by the emerging world of high-fidelity digital recording, and that obsession led the band to recording studios in the Caribbean, a remote, idyllic setting that would become the unlikely birthplace of their most defining work. The lyrical spark for Money for Nothing arrived in the most mundane of circumstances. Knopfler had wandered into a New York City appliance store and found himself standing near a wall of televisions, all of them tuned to MTV. He overheard delivery men complaining about moving refrigerators and installing microwave ovens, while rock stars collected money for nothing. Knopfler borrowed a pen and a scrap of paper and wrote the lines down right there in the store. Those overheard words became the backbone of the song, a sharp observation delivered through the voice of a man too bitter to see the irony in his own remarks. The recording sessions pushed technology to its limits. Knopfler and co-producer Neil Dorfsman made the radical decision to record Brothers in Arms fully digitally, using a 24-track recorder, among the early rock albums to attempt a fully digital production process. The process was anything but smooth. A problem with the digital tapes forced part of the work to continue at the power station in New York as the album was finished. Then came the accident that defined the song's sound forever. Knopfler was seeking a guitar tone inspired by Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top. He used a wah-wah pedal locked in a half-cocked position as a filter, but the signature texture came from something no one planned. During setup, an unplanned microphone placement helped create the distorted, hollow sound that gave the track its edge. The tone proved impossible to duplicate exactly, even with detailed notes. It was a once-in-a-lifetime accident that became one of the most recognizable guitar sounds in rock history.
Money for nothing and your chicks for free.
The shift toward digital perfection also extracted a human cost. Drummer Terry Williams, who had been with the band since 1982, found his style at odds with the demands of the click track. After weeks of sessions, he was replaced by jazz session drummer Omar Hakim, who re-recorded nearly all the drum parts in just 2 days. It was an unsentimental signal that this project was no longer about the band's shared chemistry. It was about one man's vision, perfectly executed. When Brothers in Arms arrived in May 1985, it did not simply top the charts. It became the soundtrack to a technological revolution that permanently changed how the world consumed music. The album was the proof piece for the compact disc format. Before Brothers in Arms, the CD was a struggling piece of technology, often criticized by audiophiles for sounding cold and clinical. Knopfler's obsession with sonic perfection changed that perception overnight. Brothers in Arms became the first album to sell 1 million copies on CD, and its warmth and clarity became the benchmark for hi-fi enthusiasts across the world. The album was used heavily in CD marketing and helped turn the format into a mass-market success. It spent 9 weeks at #1 in the United States and 14 weeks at the top in the United Kingdom. Then came the video. Mark Knopfler had always been a reluctant visual performer. He preferred anonymity, the quiet fingerstyle guitarist who happened to be a genius. But director Steve Barron convinced him to embrace a revolutionary new technology, computer-generated imagery. Using early CGI systems, animators created blocky, neon-colored delivery men who brought the song's lyrics to vivid digital life. The technology required weeks of rendering to complete. The result was one of the most recognizable music videos of the decade. The irony was staggering. A song written as a cynical critique of MTV became the most famous video on the channel. It swept the 1986 MTV Video Music Awards and was among the first videos played when MTV Europe launched in 1987. The band that had prided itself on restraint and musicianship was now the most recognizable visual brand in music. The tour that followed was unprecedented in scale. The Brothers in Arms tour stretched across hundreds of shows in many countries, including extended runs in major arenas. Millions of people saw the band perform. But with each sold-out stadium, the distance between Mark Knopfler the musician and Mark Knopfler the icon grew quietly wider. The success of Money for Nothing transformed Dire Straits from a musician-driven band into a global commercial force. But that transformation came at a steep psychological cost, and at its center was a man who had never wanted to be an icon in the first place. Mark Knopfler had always been a reluctant superstar. He felt more at home in a recording studio or a local pub than at a press conference or award ceremony. As the band's profile skyrocketed, he began retreating from the media, avoiding interviews and shunning the cameras. He described the magnitude of the success as dehumanizing, a word he returned to repeatedly when speaking about this period of his life. What he feared most was the loss of control over his own reality. He had famously stated that freedom, for him, meant having control over your reality rather than having it imposed upon you. The success of Money for Nothing had imposed a commercial identity on him that felt increasingly alien. Fans no longer saw the quiet fingerstyle guitarist from Deptford. They saw the headband wearing icon from the video. The band's internal dynamic shifted quietly but profoundly. Dire Straits became increasingly recognized as Mark Knopfler's vehicle with a rotating cast of musicians rather than a true collective. While John Illsley remained a constant presence and a close friend, other members found themselves with diminishing creative input and visibility. The power imbalance that had always existed, the imbalance that had driven David Knopfler out of the band years earlier, now grew into something that defined the group's very structure. Then there was the trap of the song itself. Money for Nothing had locked the band into a commercial identity that made evolution nearly impossible. For the audience who had loved the rootsy simplicity of Sultans of Swing, the polished digital sound of the mid-'80s felt like a departure. For the new fans who had discovered the band through MTV, that spectacle was the only version of Dire Straits they knew. Any attempt to move in a different direction risked alienating millions of people simultaneously. The irony of the song had been completely consumed by its own fame. A critique of rock stardom had become the primary engine of that stardom. The physical scale of the touring made everything worse. The Brothers in Arms tour lasted a full year, and by the end of it, Knopfler recalled walking into the band's catering truck and realizing he recognized none of the drivers. To him, that moment said everything. When the operation grew so large that you no longer knew your own crew, the environment stopped being real. It stopped being manageable. The machine had grown far beyond any human dimension, and the man who had built it felt swallowed by it completely. The Brothers in Arms tour ended in Sydney, Australia on April 26, 1986, with a live broadcast that reached millions. When the final notes faded, the members of Dire Straits were, in the words of those closest to them, uniformly fried to a crisp. Knopfler chose to step back immediately, retreating from the spotlight for years. He turned to smaller, more intimate projects, scoring the film The Princess Bride, recording with the Notting Hillbillies, a side band built around acoustic warmth and country simplicity. It was a deliberate return to the scale of music making he had abandoned in pursuit of the digital summit. In the years that followed, Knopfler remained largely absent from the machinery of rock superstardom. He focused on projects that let him work at a smaller scale and on his own terms. The pull of the band's legacy proved difficult to resist entirely, though. And in 1991, he was drawn back for one final effort: the album On Every Street and the tour that followed. It was a mistake he would not repeat. The On Every Street tour stretched across 229 shows in 19 countries over more than a year, playing to millions of people. The numbers were staggering, but the human cost was equally staggering. The schedule was so relentless that it put intense strain on Knopfler's personal life. And by the time the tour ended, the exhaustion had pushed everyone involved past any reasonable limit.
On every street.
Knopfler later described his decision to end the band permanently in 1995 as an act of self-protection and survival. He felt fortunate to have gotten through it, and even more fortunate not to be going through it again. The white light of superstardom had ceased to illuminate anything. It only blinded. He walked away from the biggest band in the world, not in anger, not in defeat, but in a quiet and deliberate search for something that still resembled reality. The dissolution of Dire Straits in 1995 produced no dramatic press release, no stadium farewell tour, no teary final concert broadcast around the world. It simply ended, as quietly as it had begun in that cold Deptford flat nearly 20 years earlier. Mark Knopfler's solo career became the deliberate antithesis of everything the Brothers in Arms era had represented. His debut solo album, Golden Heart, released in 1996, signaled a return to roots: Celtic rock, blues, country-inflected storytelling, small stages, and warm rooms. He had traded the catering truck with 100 strangers. For the intimacy of working with musicians he chose himself, on schedules that left room for sleep and silence. When Dire Straits was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2018, Knopfler declined to attend, citing personal reasons. John Illsley stood alone at the podium to accept the honor. It was a moment that said everything about Knopfler's relationship with the legacy he had built. Proud, perhaps, but unwilling to step back inside the machinery, even for a single ceremonial evening. Despite being offered enormous sums of money for reunion tours over the years, Knopfler remained completely unmoved. He had closed that chapter deliberately and with great effort, and he had no intention of reopening it. He continued to record and perform on his own terms and his own scale, measuring success not in attendance figures or award nominations, but in the feeling of satisfaction and fulfillment that the music brought him each morning when he picked up a guitar. That, in the end, was the freedom he had always been searching for, and the one thing superstardom had taken away. Money for Nothing remains one of the defining songs of the 1980s. For the generation of listeners who bought their first CD player in 1985, Brothers in Arms was the record that proved digital audio could be something extraordinary, warm, detailed, alive in a way that vinyl had always been and technology had finally matched. The song itself was inescapable, its neon-colored delivery men frozen in the cultural memory of an entire era. But the deeper story of the song carries a weight that its surface glory obscures. Consider the layers of irony buried inside it. A song written as a cynical commentary on the absurdity of rock stardom became the very engine of that stardom. A band that prided itself on restraint and musicianship became the most visually dominant act on the planet's most visual medium. A guitarist who described superstardom as dehumanizing built the kind of success that only superstardom could produce, then spent the rest of his career carefully and deliberately dismantling it. Dire Straits stands as one of the most unusual stories in rock history, not because of how they rose, but because of how they chose to stop. Most bands that reach the summit fight desperately to stay there. Knopfler looked down from the top and decided the climb had not been worth what it cost him. He walked away from the roar of millions to find a room small enough to feel real again. That, perhaps, is the most rock and roll thing about him. Not the guitar tone, not the headband, not the 30 million records sold. The quiet, deliberate decision to choose the music over the machine. Money for Nothing gave Dire Straits everything, except a reason to keep going. Dire Straits proved that the biggest stage can feel like the smallest cage. Mark Knopfler built an empire from a Deptford flat, watched it grow into something unrecognizable, and walked away before it consumed what he loved most about music. The songs remain timeless, but the man chose the craft over the crown. What's your memory of Dire Straits? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from rock's golden era.